Yeah, 7 grandchildren is plenty. When you're looking at it from my perspective, my wife wishes we had more. In fact, she just said 2 days ago that if we had it to do all over again, we'd have more kids just so we could have more grandchildren. But you know, when you travel with a grandmother, she's got to buy a gift for every one of them. And we're out one time and she's shopping for the little guy. I say, hey, wait a minute, time out. He's only 3 months old. He doesn't even know you left town. But she's got to bring something back for him, and I'm sure you ladies can relate to that. I want to share with you this morning a little bit about my background, who I am, what I do, then share a couple of stories and share with you in particular a situation, a life situation that we went through as a family. I, as Kent said, am the chaplain of the Trailblazers, Portland State University football team, and the Portland Beavers. I've been doing that for 24 years. It was 1980 when I finally surrendered and said yes to God in a call to full-time ministry, and didn't know what to do or how to do it or where to do it. But God had made it clear to me in my spirit, in my mind, that I was to be available to athletes and coaches. So when I finally surrendered to that, after an 11-month argument or battle with God, on Sunday I made the commitment. On Tuesday I ran into Michael Thompson on the street downtown. Michael's a former Blazer. Michael knew me. I knew Michael because I'd sold him a home, and we had prayed together, so he knew of my Christian background. And Michael said, out of the blue, I didn't tell him anything was going on, and Michael said, Al, if I could get some guys on the team together, would you lead a Bible study? And I had just said, yes, God, I'll be available to athletes and coaches. So what could I say to Michael? 2 days later, I got a phone call from Neil Lomax, who was then at Portland State University, later went on to a very successful NFL football career. And Neil called and said, Al, we're trying to get a Bible study going on our football team. Would you lead us? And I've just said yes to God, so I had to say yes to Neil. And that's how the ministry, Beyond Victory Ministries, began. And in that time, all I've ever done is answer or agree to requests from athletes and coaches. I've never gone to an athlete or a coach and said, I'm Al Egg of Beyond Victory, can I do a Bible study or chapel? Never done that. Everything has been at their request. Don Reed came to Portland State that first spring after we started the Bible study as the new head coach. And he called me in one day. He said, Al, you've got a Bible study for the players. How about doing one for my coaching staff? And I said, sure. So he scheduled it for Thursday mornings. Every Tuesday morning was his staff meeting. And every Tuesday morning, Don would announce to his staff, Al will be here Thursday morning at 8:30 for Bible study. You're all invited. Well, for 11 months, 42 weeks, Don Reed and I met together in Bible study. Just the two of us. Sometimes he'd say, is it worth it, Al? And I'd say, is it worth it for you, Coach? He'd say, yes. I'd say, okay, I don't worry about numbers. So we hung in there. On the 43rd week, an assistant coach came to Bible study. 2 weeks later, another one. Within a month of that, all but one of the 10 coaches had come to at least one of the Bible studies. And for the next 4 years that staff was here, 9 out of those 10 coaches attended Bible study on a fairly regular basis. And 9 out of 10 is a pretty high percentage. So that was an interesting time. In October 1981, it was a Friday night, and we were at a football game, and our daughter was on the dance team, and our kids were playing ball. We call them our kids because I was leading a Fellowship of Christian Athletes group at Sunset High School. And so I had a lot of those young football players in my FCA group, and we'd gone to watch them play and to watch our daughter dance. And then we went home afterwards, and we got a call at about 1:45 that night from the hospital telling us that our daughter had been in an accident and we needed to get there as soon as possible. So we raced to St. Vincent Hospital, and when we arrived there, we were greeted by the chaplain and the social worker. And those really aren't the people you want to be greeting you when you arrive at the hospital. And they advised us that our daughter had been involved in a single car accident, that she had suffered head injuries, that she was unconscious, but that we could go in and see her. Now, when they said head injuries, my wife drew a mental picture that did not allow her to go in and see Lisa at that time. She said, I can't do that. And so I went in alone, and my wife went to a waiting room. We found out later in conversation that at that time, we both dealt with this incredible adversity. The greatest tragedy we've ever known in our lives, we dealt with it exactly the same way. As I walked in to see my daughter, I walked in there in prayer, praying, God, please help us. My wife went into the waiting room and said, Lord, this is too big for us. We give it to you right now and trust you. And that's how we dealt with that adversity. Well, the result was that Lisa was in the hospital in the intensive care unit in a coma for 1 week. And on Friday morning, October 30th, she died. And the hospital was filled with kids at that time. They'd been coming every day after school, but that morning somehow word leaked out at the high school where they were posting notices every day of her progress, which there really wasn't any progress, but they were putting notices. Somehow word leaked out that she was not doing well, and kids were cutting class and coming to the hospital. And they were all over the place. And finally, the security people at the hospital had asked us to please get them out of the hallways. And so they had taken them into various waiting rooms. And when Lisa died, we came out of the intensive care unit there, and my wife said, honey, we've got to talk to these kids. And I said, I can't go from room to room to room right now and do that. Well, just then the chaplain came around the corner, and I said, Jim, is there some place where we can get all the kids together and speak to them for a minute? He said, yes, we don't need the chapel for a couple of hours yet. I'll get them there. And so he got all the kids up in that chapel. It was standing room only. It was a room about as big as this right here. And God allowed us to go in, and I just said to those kids, don't ever give up on God. God heard your prayers, but our underlying prayer was that Lisa received God's very best. And we believe that because we're her parents, that was an overriding prayer, and we believe Lisa got God's very best when he allowed her to go home to her, or to him. And it was just an incredible experience. And I can't even begin to share with you all the stories that have come back to us about that experience, kids at that time and other people. My son is a Washington County deputy sheriff. And 3 years ago, 20 years after the accident, he had a drunken driving accident situation where he had to follow the ambulance to the hospital and wait for the driver to be treated of his injuries so he could get a blood test on him, determine the alcohol level. So he's waiting in the lobby of the emergency room there. And the nurse on duty saw his name badge and said, excuse me, are you by any chance related to the chaplain of the Trailblazers? And John said, yes, he's my father. She said, oh, you're Lisa's brother. She said, I can never tell you the impact her situation had on my life as I worked here at that time. And that's just 20 years later. But things were happening, and things did happen. I can tell you this, that I believe, my wife and I believe, that if we had not had the relationship with God that we had at that time, and we're not talking about religion. I don't know about religion. I don't think I'm a religious person. I think my neighbor is. He washes his car at 10 o'clock every Saturday morning. I think that's a religious thing. He does it religiously. But I'm talking about a relationship. If we had not had a deep personal relationship with God, I don't know how we would have gotten through that situation. I have ideas. One idea is I don't believe we'd be married today if we hadn't had that relationship with God, going through that tragedy with Him, guiding and directing us. We wouldn't be together at all. I know that. And contrary to that, we have a great marriage. And our relationship with God at that time, He just pulled us together. And He strengthened us. And He allowed us to minister to other people as they came to attempt to minister to us that week in the hospital. And there were just incredible and amazing things that happened there. Just a little bit about my work with the athletes. I meet with the Blazers. Those who are open to coming to chapel, it's an optional thing. 1 hour before game time, every game. At 60 minutes on the countdown clock tonight, which will be, let's see, it's a 7:05 game, so at 6:05, I'll be in the Blazer weight room to do a chapel service, about a 15-minute service out of the Bible for those players who want to come in. And normally, let's see, we're playing Boston tonight. I only get the Eastern teams once a year, so I'm not sure. Probably a couple of guys there from Boston will be in chapel, but I'll have 7 to 9 of our players in chapel tonight. Sunday night against Phoenix, we had 3 Phoenix Suns and 8 Blazer players in chapel, and that's pretty much the way it's been this season. 2 years ago, when we got the name Jailblazers, at that time we were getting 9 to 11 players in chapel every night, the entire season. It was the highest consistent chapel attendance of any team in the history of the NBA, and yet we were becoming Jailblazers at the same time. I can't explain that. That's just how things are. Portland State football, I do chapel every game. I travel with the football team. It's the only team I travel with. Believe me, I wouldn't want any part of the Trailblazer travel schedule. It's brutal. I'm thankful that I don't travel with them. But because in the NBA our chapel service is open to players on both teams, there's no need for me to travel. They can go to chapel in every city that they go to, because we now have chaplains working with every team in the NBA. We were the 3rd team in the league to have chapel of any kind, the 1st team to do it every game. And again, that was at the request of players. Kelvin Ramsey asked me to do the first chapel service, and he wanted it every game, and Jack Ramsey agreed to that, and so that's how it all began there. Portland State, just a kind of an interesting story. Let me say this about athletes. Athletes understand more than anybody else, I think, the value of the playbook or the manufacturer's handbook, whatever you want to call it. See, athletes always have a playbook. When Don Shula was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, if a player lost the playbook, it cost him $10 a page. And the playbook was about that thick. The fine was pretty heavy to lose a playbook. Athletes know that most of them have enough talent to go out and play the game based on their talent alone and get by. And they can do that. But they also know that if they go by the book, if they go by the playbook, it's much, much better than doing it alone. I'm a high-tech flunky. I have trouble with anything. I mean, I get a new cell phone, and it takes me hours to wade through the book to try to figure out how to even begin to program that thing. And usually I end up calling my son, having him come in and do it for me. I can't do it on my own at all. But if I read the book, I can get through it a little bit. Now, most of you people can probably do that without ever looking at the book. I can't. I can get by, but if I want to do it right, I've got to read the book. The Bible, my acronym for the word Bible, B-I-B-L-E, is Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. This is the playbook. This is the manufacturer's handbook. Everything we need to know about life, God gave us in His playbook. And so my athletes understand that. People can get by in life without ever opening the book. They're doing it every day. Many people. But I've learned that I can get by much better if I go by the book. Life works better when I go by the book. Let me share just a story out of this book. This is a new book titled Mentoring, or Divine Secrets of Mentoring, written by Carol Brazo, who lives in Sherwood. She's a local author, and she's writing this book. A lot of it's about losing her mother to death a few years ago. And Carol writes this, says, during my first year of teaching high school English, sorrow and loss seemed as distant as Neptune and Pluto. At 23, the worst I could imagine was losing my dog. I had learned that boyfriends come and go, but a good lap dog is a comfort forever. That year, a family in our church lost a 16-year-old daughter in a car accident. In the blink of an eye, a dearly loved girl left her father and mother and journeyed home to her Savior. I did not know the family well, only by sight, but they would teach me one of the most important lessons in how to survive grief and loss. I did not spend hours contemplating their sorrow. Like most people, I found it easier to murmur platitudes, promise prayer, and forget it all as quickly as possible. I was unaware that I too had a lesson to learn. On the Sunday morning after Friday's tragedy, the mother and father were in church. Today, I realize that there's great strength and comfort in the community of believers. Then I was simply stunned that anyone would go out in public so soon. But there they were. Al is about 5'10" and stocky. I'm about 40 pounds less now than I was then. He looks like a wrestling coach, all energy and power in the shape of a block. His red-brown hair caps off incredible energy. Next to him was his wife, Andy, almost as tall as her husband. Slender, with shoulder-length blonde hair and large, soulful eyes. While Al is the picture of strength, Andy is wraith-like. Her hands are delicate, her limbs slender, her eyes large and deep-set. I should have known that a wraith married to a powerhouse would have unbelievable resources of her own. I cannot recall the songs we sang that morning, but I'll never forget the picture of grace and faith that was given me that morning. There in the third row, 2 days after their daughter's death, Al and Andy praised God. His powerful arms and her slender, delicate ones were lifted heavenward. Empty arms expressing spirits full of trust and hope. When Mother was dying, remembering those arms raised in tenacious, faith-filled worship gave me hope. Hope that arms and hands and entire beings can still be full of faith and gifted with grace. In October, I was in Flagstaff, Arizona with the football team. We're at Northern Arizona State University, and I'm on the field about an hour and a half before the game. Our kickers are out. They're the first ones on the field. They're out warming up. The rest of the team's still getting dressed. I'm sitting on the bench on the sidelines. And our athletic director was a young guy, only been here 3 years, came by and he stopped and he said, "Al, didn't you have a tragedy in your family with one of your children or something?" And I said, "Yes, I lost a daughter in an auto accident." And I hadn't thought about this at all. I wasn't thinking, it wasn't on my mind, but as he said that, and I said, "Yes, I lost a daughter in an auto accident," it hit me like that, and I said, "Oh, Jim, that accident was 23 years ago today. This is the anniversary." And so he asked me all about it and how we dealt with that, and I shared with him. About an hour later, a half hour later, I'm out on the field. Most of the team is out warming up now, but not all, and I'm walking along, and the defensive line coach for Northern Arizona saw me, and he came over and we hugged, and I said, "How you doing, Bill?" And he said, "Pretty good." And I knew that a few years ago he slipped on the ice in Salt Lake City when he was coaching at the University of Utah and cracked his head. And that 2 years ago he suffered a stroke and he has no feeling in his left leg. And he said, "I'm just thankful to still be able to coach football at age 58. And we talked for a few minutes, and I said, "Bill, do you remember my daughter's death?" He said, "Al, I will never forget that as long as I live." I said, "Well, our athletic director just brought that up, and I realized that today's the anniversary. It's 23 years ago today, that accident." He said, "Al, you will never know the impact that had on my life as I watched how you dealt with that tragedy." He said, "I've had a lot of stuff happen the last few years, but every time something's happened, I've reflected back on how you dealt with that, and it's helped me." He is that one football coach who never came to the Bible study. How do you figure? And yet 23 years later, he's telling me this. I share that with you for this reason. We never know the impact we're having on another life at any given time. We all have influence. You never know who's watching and why. You never know the impact you're having. And I don't know about you, but if I'm going to have impact on anybody's life, I want it to be impact for eternity. And I want it to be positive impact. The playbook, there are a couple of places in the playbook that I think give us a pretty good direction on how to deal with any kind of adversity. The Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, makes this statement. He says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Now, all Paul is saying there in simple language is this: don't worry about anything, pray about everything. Our normal reaction to adversity is worry, isn't it? But the direction in the playbook is don't worry, pray. And we believe that's what my wife and I did at that time, and we believe that's why it came out the way it did. The Apostle Peter then later says basically the same thing when he says, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. It's really pretty simple. This old peanut butter jar here represents the world that you and I live in. Now, if that's the world we live in, what do you think the walnut represents? Anybody got an idea? Kent, what do you think?
I'm not that deep.
Okay. Anybody? If that's the world we live in, that's us. We're all just a little bit on the nutty side, I think. Okay? So that walnut's our life. That's the world we live in. What do you think the beans represent? Anybody? Yes.
Anxieties.
Anxieties. That's the adversities that you and I face in life. In a week or a day, we all have them. Adversity comes in every size package. And how do we deal with adversity? Well, most of us, especially the men, deal with it head on. I can handle this. I can deal with this. I can take care of it. Women are better about turning things over to God than men are. Most of us we can do it. And when we try to deal with all of our adversities on our own in that manner, have you ever been there? Felt like the whole world was coming down on you? And that's how it is when we're trying to deal with adversity on our own. But the playbook said, don't worry about anything, pray about everything. It said, cast all your cares, that's those adversities, on him, for he cares for you. And when we do that, when we do it God's way, sometimes he does the miraculous. He still does. But most often, what God does is not remove the problem or do the miraculous. Most often what he does is just work in our lives and pull us up above the problems so that we can live above them rather than under them. And I know this, but I still end up here too often. But as often as we will give our problems to God in prayer, that's how often he will pull us above the problems and let us live above them rather than under them. And believe me, this is a much better place to live. Questions? While you're thinking of a question, let me just share again this book, Mentoring. This book has nothing to do with the adversity that I talked about or anything. It's just a book that has become my favorite right now. In September, Joe Ehrman was featured on the cover of Parade magazine in our Oregonian with the title, "We Believe This is America's Best Coach." Well, I saw that, and I know Joe. He's a former NFL football player, and he's been in our home, and he's a pastor in Baltimore now, and he's a volunteer high school football coach in Baltimore. So I told my wife, as I read through that story in Parade, it was part of a book, this book. I said, I want the book for my birthday, which was coming up right then. In fact, this is kind of an interesting thing. Remember 9/11? That week, I read in the newspaper this little tidbit of trivia. They began construction, or the birth of the Pentagon building, on September 11th, 1941, the day I was born. The Pentagon and I are exactly the same age. And so I asked for the book, and she got it for me, and it's one of the finest things I've read, and I cannot recommend it too much for fathers. Man, this is a book that the whole purpose or focus of these two coaches, Joe Ehrman, my friend the volunteer, and Biff, the head coach, their whole purpose is to build boys into men for others, while the world is building boys into men for self. Just one little thing out of the book. After the first game of the season, he writes about a football season here. After the first game of the season, a mother came to the head coach and she said, "Do you think this will be a successful season?" Now that's a question that coaches get all the time. That's a very common, normal question. His answer wasn't very common or normal. The coach answered and said, "Well, we probably won't know that for about 20 years. 20 years from now, when these boys come back and we find out what kind of men they are, what kind of husbands they are, and what kind of fathers they are, then we'll know if this was a successful season." Wow. Okay, any questions? Yes, I'm sorry.
You said at one time you made a decision to go to the ministry your whole time. Was there something primarily that drove you to that? Was it a Bible verse or?
It wasn't a verse so much. I was reading the Bible extensively at that time. I'd made the decision in December of 1979, I guess, in reading a book titled Love, I shouldn't have started that. It's written by Jerry Cook out in Gresham, Love, Acceptance, and Forgiveness. And in the book, I was challenged to read through the Psalms, the Proverbs, and the New Testament. And so I decided to do it every month, and I did that every month in the year 1980. So it was in the midst of that I just felt this calling, I can't explain it, God spoke clearly to my heart, not in an audible voice. And it was to be available to athletes and coaches, and I wasn't an athlete or a coach. It didn't make sense. I hadn't been to seminary or cemetery or anything like that. And I had no training or background, but it was clear that God was calling me. And there were little things that happened every month for 11 months. And finally in November, I just said, yes, Lord, I'll be available. Yes?
What was it like when you were growing up? What kind of family did you grow up in?
Family background, a good family, a lot of love in the family, no spiritual connections at all in the family. We didn't go to church. I did with friends occasionally, and my first 10 years, I did go to church all the time. It was from a baby right up through 10 years with my paternal grandmother who lived next door to us. But when we moved away from there, that was gone. So I had very little background growing up. Yes?
Why weren't your parents interested in religion?
They had very diverse opinions about religion. And so because of their diverse opinion about denominations and that kind of thing, they just chose not to. So. Yes, Ken?
I'll try to form this question clearly, but it must be so frustrating to you that the picture that most of us have of professional athletes is as far from what you've described this morning, I think, as possible. It's 180 degrees. What do you attribute that? Do you have anything that you would attribute that to?
At the risk of getting in trouble, I attribute it to one word: media. I've stood next to ball players as they were being interviewed, heard every word of the interview, picked up the paper the next day and read something so foreign I couldn't believe it. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. We have some really good people in the media, but there are a lot of people out there with their own agenda, and sometimes that agenda is not good for the people that they're writing about and not good for those they're writing to. My opinion. So, yes?
And do teams have to be, does team management have to be careful about taking positions on the team? Well, I never had any idea there was chapel before NBA basketball games. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Is that something that the team management has to kind of keep hands off, or?
Yeah, we have chapel.
Opportunity for all fans?
Right, here's why we have chapel. Professional athletes don't have the opportunity to go to church during the season. Their schedule just precludes that. They practice or play every day. If they don't have a game, they've got practice from 10 till 1. If they've got a game, they've got a walkthrough from 10 to 11 and then home to rest for the game that night. And so athletes, a few of them, years ago, came to some men and said, we need church and we can't go. Can you bring church to us? And that's how the whole chapel program originated. It originated in the NFL with Bill Glass, who played for the Cleveland Browns, is now a retired man, has a prison ministry. And then he introduced it to Watson Spolstra, who was a sports writer, an alcoholic sports writer with the Detroit Free Press, had an incredible experience, changed his life, and he started Baseball Chapel. Waddy went home to heaven about 3 years ago. His son, John Spolstra, headed up the Blazers marketing program for years and still lives here in town. And then it spread to the NBA in about 1980. So, but we're there at the request of the players rather than management. Right. And management has just not been very excited or open about it in a lot of cities, but because of the players, they've acquiesced to it. So, anything else?
Did I miss it, or did you say what you were doing before 79?
I spent 10 years in the import plywood business, and with Simpson International first, and then DG Shelter Products, which prior to that was named Heron Products, right here in town. And then I spent 4 years in residential real estate sales with Allen C. Edwards. And it's really interesting. I hope it had nothing to do with me. I trust it was just God moving me ahead of things. But 2 years after I left Simpson International, they closed it. 2 years after I left DG Shelter Products, it was gone. And 3 years after I left Allen C. Edwards, they were gone. I don't think it was me. I think God was just getting me out of there before everything folded. So.
Are you planning on leaving the Blazers anytime?
No. That's a good note to stop on. Thank you.